I never imagined that my own brother would be the one to put a knife in my back. We grew up close, or so I believed, sharing laughter and secrets. As adults, we remained a tight-knit family. So when my younger brother, Daniel, told me he and his partner were expecting a baby, I was overjoyed. I was going to be an aunt, and I promised myself I'd do anything to support them. Little did I know how that promise would be tested behind closed doors. In the early weeks after his son was born, I visited Daniel and his girlfriend, Mara, often. Their apartment was small and modest, but they made it cozy for the newborn. I brought groceries, cooked them dinner, and even helped paint a corner of their bedroom to serve as a nursery. One evening, as we sat together over takeout in their cramped living room, Mara sighed, bouncing the baby in her arms. "I wish we had more space for little Jake," she murmured softly. She gave a quick, almost apologetic glance in my direction. Daniel shifted uncomfortably next to her. I noticed his eyes flicker away when I met his gaze. At the time, I thought he was just tired from sleepless nights. I offered a reassuring smile and said, "You know you can always bring him to my place. There's plenty of room to play in the yard when he's a bit older." Mara returned my smile politely, but an awkward silence settled. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something in the air felt off, a subtle tension I hadn't felt with them before. A couple of weeks later, I hosted a small family dinner at my house to celebrate Jake's 1-month milestone. My house, a cozy 3-bedroom home with a little garden, had always been my sanctuary. I had worked hard in my career to afford it, pouring my heart into making it a warm, welcoming place. That night, my parents, Daniel, and Mara gathered around my dining table. We laughed and told stories, doting on the new baby as we passed him around for cuddles. Yet, amid the laughter, I caught moments of quiet exchange, my mother's eyes lingering on the family photos on my wall, Daniel chewing his lip as he glanced down the hallway toward the spare bedrooms, Mara biting her tongue as if holding something back. During dessert, the conversation took a strange turn. My father cleared his throat and said, "This cake is delicious. You always were good at taking care of things, making a home." He trailed off, then added casually, "Your house is so spacious for just one person, Emily." I fumbled with my fork, taken aback by the sudden comment. "I suppose," I replied lightly. "I like having room, and it's nice for when family visits." My mother chimed in, her tone overly cheerful. "It certainly is. And now with our little Jake, space is exactly what a young family needs." She reached across to tickle my nephew's tummy, avoiding my eyes. I felt a small knot of anxiety form in my stomach. I glanced at Daniel. He looked down at his plate, pushing cake crumbs around, clearly uncomfortable. Mara was busy adjusting the baby's blanket, her face turned away. An uneasy feeling crept up on me. Was I imagining things, or were they hinting at something? That night, after everyone left, I wandered through my quiet house, trying to shake off the unease. I walked into the extra bedroom I'd converted to a home office and spare guest room, then the second small spare room filled with boxes of my old books and childhood memorabilia. "It's so spacious for just one person." My father's words echoed in my mind. I loved my home dearly. It wasn't just a building, it was the place I felt safe, the place I envisioned building my own future, maybe even a family of my own someday. Why did I suddenly feel guilty for having too much space? I tried to laugh it off, but I couldn't quell the worry that something was shifting in my family's attitude. Over the next few weeks, that shift became more noticeable. My parents started dropping pointed comments in nearly every conversation. If I mentioned having a quiet weekend at home, Mom would sigh, "Must be nice to have peace and quiet." Poor Daniel and Mara hardly get any in that tiny apartment with the baby. If I talked about doing yard work, Dad would note, "Daniel wishes he had a yard for Jake to play in." Apartments are no place for a curious boy. Each remark was mild on its own, but together they felt like pressure on my chest. I began to dread what would come next. One Sunday afternoon, my mother came over unannounced. I welcomed her in, albeit surprised, and made tea. As we sat in the living room, she scanned the walls and furniture with a nervous energy. After a few sips, she cut straight to the point. "Emily," she began, voice gentle but firm, "have you thought about possibly, I don't know, sharing this house with Daniel and Mara? At least for a while." I felt my stomach drop. So I hadn't been imagining the hints. They finally dared to say it outright. I put my cup down, my hands trembling slightly. "Mom, this is my home," I answered slowly. "What exactly are you suggesting?" She gave a plaintive smile. "Hear me out, sweetheart. You're on your own and you have this whole big house. Your brother has a new baby and no space. Would it be so terrible if you let them live here, just until they get on their feet? Family helps family, after all." She rushed on before I could respond. "Of course you could stay too, for a while at least. Or maybe you could use this opportunity to, perhaps find a smaller place for yourself? Something easier to maintain, maybe an apartment? You're always so busy with work, you don't really need a yard." I could not believe what I was hearing. My own mother, essentially asking me to give up my home. I felt a mix of hurt and anger rise in my throat. Trying to stay calm, I replied, "Mom, I understand wanting to help Daniel, but this house is my home. I bought it with my own money. It's not just a roof over my head, it's every bit of security I have. Why should I be the one to move out and live in a tiny apartment or give up what I worked for?" Her expression tightened slightly. "Because, dear, you wouldn't be giving up anything permanently. It would be for Daniel's family, for your nephew. You could help raise him. And once they're stable, maybe you could have the house back, or maybe by then you'd have other plans. You're not even married. You don't have children. It's different for you." There it was, the justification that because I was single and childless, my needs were somehow less important. My eyes stung. "Different for me?" I echoed, voice shaking. "Mom, are you saying I don't deserve my own home because I don't have a husband or kids?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, feeling an irrational need to protect what was mine. "Of course you deserve a home, Emily." "That's not what I meant," she said, flustered. "It's just, Daniel is struggling. Mara is like a daughter to me and little Jake. We all want what's best for the baby. He needs space to grow up healthy and happy. You wouldn't want your nephew to suffer, would you?" I felt a surge of guilt mixing with indignation. I loved my nephew. I wanted him to be happy. But the implication was clear. If I refused, I was choosing my house over his well-being. My mother's eyes were wet with emotion as she continued, "Your father and I can't help them financially beyond what we already do. You're in a position to really make a difference in their lives." I realized then that this was not just a casual suggestion. My parents were firmly on Daniel's side. They genuinely expected me to step aside and hand over my home. I was the capable one, the independent one. In their eyes, I could manage somehow, but Daniel with a baby could not. The unfairness of it made me feel faint. I asked quietly, "Did Daniel put you up to this?" Mom hesitated just a beat too long. "He would never ask if he wasn't desperate. You know your brother. He's proud, he hates relying on others. This is really Mara's idea, and your father, and I also think it could solve a lot of problems for everyone." I closed my eyes, rubbing my temple. I could hear my pulse in my ears. "Problems for everyone, or just for Daniel?" I said bitterly. I stood up, needing space to breathe. My mother's face fell as she realized I was not immediately agreeing. I paced the living room, struggling to remain respectful. "Mom, I need you to understand something. This house isn't just extra space or a roof. It's my home. You're asking me to uproot my entire life. If I do this, where do I go? I'd be a guest in my own home or forced out of it. How can you ask that of me?" She sighed, her tone hardening just a touch. "Sometimes we all have to make sacrifices, Emily. Your brother would do the same for you if the situation were reversed. Would he?" I wondered. Looking back on our lives, I wasn't so sure. Daniel and I had always gotten along, but truthfully, I had often been the one to step aside for him. He was the younger one, the golden boy in my parents' eyes. Growing up, I gave up opportunities, changed plans, even shared my savings when he needed help with college fees. I did it gladly out of love. But this was too much. I need time to think, I finally said, my voice cold. Please, I can't give you an answer right now. My mother left shortly after, disappointment etched on her face. As I closed the door behind her, I felt the weight of what was coming for the first time. A sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach as I realized this wasn't going to simply blow over. My own family was preparing to battle me over my home. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation, heart pounding with anxiety. Maybe I was selfish? Maybe I should give in and let them stay here, I thought. After all, it's true I don't need all this space. I tossed and turned, imagining my house filled with the cries and laughter of my nephew. Part of me warmed to that idea. I did love them, and it might be nice to not be alone. But the thought of me living like a guest, or moving to a small apartment while my brother's family occupied my place, made my chest tighten with resentment. How could they even imagine that scenario was fair? A few days later, Daniel himself reached out to talk. He asked if I could meet him for coffee in town. I agreed, hopeful and anxious. Perhaps we could find a reasonable compromise. I arrived at the cafe first, tapping my foot nervously until I saw him walk in. My brother looked tired, dark circles under his eyes from late-night feedings and an uncertain, forced smile on his face. We hugged briefly, and I felt the familiar affection. I hated that things were strained between us. After we got our coffees and sat in a quiet corner, Daniel cleared his throat. I'm sorry Mom ambushed you the other day, he began softly. I told her to give me a chance to talk to you first. I never wanted you to feel pressured. I studied his face. He did look genuinely apologetic and uneasy. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I appreciate that, Danny, I said, using his childhood nickname. I have to be honest, this whole thing has really upset me. I feel like everyone expects me to just hand over my house. It's not right. He flinched at my blunt words. Wrapping his hands around his coffee cup, he stared down at it. I know how it sounds. Believe me, I've been struggling with this. When Mara first brought it up, I told her no. I said I couldn't possibly ask you for such a thing. He swallowed hard and continued, but things are really tough for us right now. We can't afford a bigger place, and the lease on our apartment is ending soon. The landlord is selling the unit, so we'll have to move out in 2 months. We looked at other apartments. Everything is either too expensive or too small for a family of 3. I listened quietly, my heart softening despite myself. Daniel sounded genuinely distressed. Why didn't you tell me your lease was ending? I asked gently. I could have helped you find a new place or lent you money for a deposit on a bigger rental. He shook his head. I didn't want to burden you. And Mara, she just keeps saying how perfect your house would be for us. She sees it as a simple solution. You move out, we move in. In her mind, it's win-win. We get a house for the baby, and you, well, you get to help your nephew. I grimaced. Help, meaning I'd give up my home. He finally looked me in the eyes, pain evident in his. I'm so sorry. I know this is asking a hell of a lot. I feel awful even having this conversation. You have every right to be angry. He hesitated, then added in a choked voice, but I'm desperate. We're desperate. I don't know what to do. Mara is crying every night. The baby stuff is taking up all the space. I'm caught in the middle. I either disappoint my partner and risk my son growing up in a cramped flat we can barely afford, or I ask you for the impossible. My throat tightened as I watched tears welling in my brother's eyes. It was difficult to see him like this, torn and vulnerable. This was exactly the emotional vice I was afraid of, my love for my brother versus my own needs and boundaries. I reached out and put a hand over his. I wish I could fix everything for you, I said softly. But giving up my house, Danny, that would break me. This is my home. Where would I go? Live with a friend? Start renting some apartment that isn't mine? It's not that simple. This house means so much to me. You remember when I bought it, right? How excited I was to finally have my own place. He nodded, biting his lip. I remember. You threw that barbecue party in the backyard and you were so proud. I was proud of you too. His voice was barely above a whisper. That's what makes this so hard. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us blinking back tears. For a brief second, I felt a ray of hope. Maybe he truly understood how unreasonable this was. Maybe he'd stand up to Mara and our parents and drop the whole idea. I squeezed his hand. Listen, I want to help you, I really do. Maybe we can find another way. You and Mara could move in here with me for a short while if you need, and we'd share the space until you find a new place. Or I can help financially, as much as I can afford, to get you into a bigger home. I'm not throwing you to the wolves, I swear. I can't give up ownership of my house or be pushed out of it. Please understand that. Daniel's face clouded. He gently withdrew his hand from mine. Live here with you. Temporary solutions, loans, he muttered, sounding unconvinced. I could tell these options weren't what he had in mind. Likely Mara wouldn't accept anything short of having the house to themselves. He inhaled deeply, steeling himself. Mara thinks living together would be too crowded and complicated, and she doesn't want to take your money like charity. She really has her heart set on raising Jake here. She says the neighborhood is safer, the schools will be better when he's older, and that a baby shouldn't grow up in a tiny apartment if there's a family home available. Family home. The phrase hit me like a slap. This was my home, not some communal family property, but apparently Mara saw it differently. My temper, which I'd been struggling to keep in check, flared at last. I pulled back, folding my arms. Mara has her heart set on it? That's nice, but it's not her decision. This isn't an empty house up for grabs. It's where I live, Daniel. He bristled slightly at my tone. I know that. You think I don't know that? God, why do you think I'm practically begging here? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration leaking out. You're acting like we want to toss you aside. It's not like that. We'd always let you visit. I couldn't help it. A bitter laugh escaped me. Let me visit? In my own house. I shook my head in disbelief. Can you hear yourself? You're talking like it'll be your house, and I'd be some guest. Don't you see how messed up that is? Daniel's cheeks reddened. Poor choice of words. He conceded quietly, looking ashamed again. He lowered his voice, pleading, I'm just trying to find a solution. I hate this as much as you do. But I have to put my child first. And what about me? Am I not family too? I asked, my voice cracking. The people at neighboring tables pretended not to eavesdrop, but I could feel their eyes on us. I blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Don't I matter at all here? My needs, my life, do they count for anything in this equation? My brother looked at me with hollow eyes, and for a moment, I saw the depth of his conflict. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Instead, he just looked down, silent. That silence spoke volumes. To him, right now, my life didn't matter as much as his new family's needs. Blood may be thicker than water, but apparently it was not thicker than the demands of his partner and child. I realized then that Daniel wasn't going to stand up for me. At least not as strongly as I'd hoped. I wiped my eyes and whispered, I can't do what you ask. I'm sorry, but I can't give you my home. The finality of those words hung in the air. He slowly nodded, eyes moist, but resigned. I understand, he said, though I could tell he was deeply disappointed. I had to ask. I promised Mara I'd at least ask. We left the cafe with a hug that felt heavier than any we'd shared before. He held on a second longer, as if it might be the last time. I love you, sis, he mumbled into my shoulder. I love you too, I whispered back, voice trembling. Please let love be enough, I prayed silently. But as I watched him walk away to his car, shoulders slumped, I felt a cold dread. The storm hadn't passed. It was gathering force. In the days that followed, communication with my family grew sparse and strained. I'd call my mother, only to get curt, one-word answers. My father avoided talking about anything beyond superficial check-ins. I found myself left out of the loop on family plans. One evening I learned through social media that my parents had gone out to dinner with Daniel and Mara, and I hadn't even been invited. It stung terribly. When I finally confronted my mom about it, she sighed, "We just assumed you wouldn't want to join, given everything. It's been so tense." Tense. That was an understatement. I felt like I was on trial, judged and found guilty by my own kin for the crime of not relinquishing my house. One afternoon, I got a text from an aunt who lived out of state, heard about the house situation. "Your mom says you're being difficult. I'm sure you'll do the right thing, hun. Family comes first." My hands shook with rage and hurt as I read it. They were talking about me to the extended family, painting me as the villain. My parents, or maybe even Daniel, had been sharing a one-sided story that I was refusing to help my poor brother in need. That was a deep stab in the back. Rather than respecting my decision, they were rallying others to pressure me. That evening, I called Daniel, furious and in tears. "How could you?" I yelled the moment he answered. "How could you all air our private business to everyone and make me out to be some kind of monster?" He sounded genuinely taken aback. What are you talking about?" Aunt Carol texted me. "She basically told me I should give you the house because family comes first." "Did you put Mom up to this? Or was it Mara?" Daniel groaned, frustration on the other end. "Mom shouldn't have involved Carol. Damn it. Look, I didn't want others dragged into this. Mara might have vented to her sister and maybe word got around. I don't know. I'll talk to Mom. I never called you a monster, I did mention to Mom that you said no. I was upset, but I didn't think she'd go telling the whole world." I sank onto my couch, burying my face in my free hand. My voice came out small. "I feel so betrayed, Danny. By everyone. You all are ganging up on me. Do you even realize how much this is hurting me?" There was a long pause. Then he said quietly, "You're not the only one hurting." That was the last straw. All the pent-up frustration and pain exploded out of me. "Really? Is that what you have to say?" I snapped. "Yes, you're having a hard time, but have you spent even a second thinking about what this is like for me? My own family has basically told me I'm selfish and difficult because I won't hand over my home. Instead of understanding my side, you've let them spread this narrative that I'm the bad guy. I have been nothing but good to you my whole life, Daniel. And the one time I hold on to something that's mine, I'm suddenly public enemy number one. It's not fair." I was outright sobbing now, words tumbling out between ragged breaths. On the other end, Daniel was silent. Perhaps there was nothing left to say. Finally, in a weary tone, he responded, "I'm sorry you feel that way." A politician's answer, an acknowledgement of my feelings without any admission of wrongdoing. It broke my heart. I hung up after that. I couldn't bear to continue. That night I cried myself to sleep, clutching one of the couch pillows as if it could substitute for the embrace of a family that was slipping away from me. The walls of my beloved home felt like they were closing in, the very space that once comforted me now a reminder of the wedge driven between me and my family. A week later, the breaking point came. My parents, Daniel, and Mara all showed up at my house unannounced. It was a Saturday afternoon. I remember I was in the garden pruning roses when I saw their cars pull up. My heart started pounding in my chest as they approached with determined faces. I wiped my dirt-streaked hands on my jeans, anxiety coiling tight in my belly. "We need to talk, Emily," my father said sternly. They filed into my living room, the atmosphere heavy and formal, as if this were a business negotiation or an intervention. Mara held baby Jake in her arms, and the baby gurgled innocently, oblivious to the brewing conflict. I stood opposite them, my back near the fireplace, arms crossed protectively over my chest. My father cleared his throat. "We've all discussed this together, and we just can't understand your refusal to help your brother." He spoke as though reading from a prepared statement. This situation has gotten out of hand. We're here to resolve it as a family. I felt my pulse in my throat. I looked at Daniel. He avoided eye contact, staring at the floor. Mara was the one who met my gaze, her expression tense. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She'd clearly been crying. I broke the silence, my voice quiet but firm. Resolve it how? By me giving up my house? I have already given you my answer. I can't do that. Mom sniffled. Please, dear. Try to reconsider. We all need to compromise here for the sake of peace. Compromise? My voice sharpened. Funny, because so far the only compromise anyone has suggested is that I surrender my home. What exactly are you all sacrificing in this scenario? My entire life is the only thing on the table. Mara spoke up, her tone edged with frustration. We've offered to let you stay here as long as you need until you find another place. We're not kicking you onto the streets, Emily. And we'd of course cover utilities and upkeep while we live here. It's not like we expect a free ride. I stared at her, incredulous. Do you even hear yourself, Mara? Allow me to stay in my own house until I find another place? How generous, I said bitterly. And you'd pay the bills for the house you want to take over, how noble. But none of you seem to grasp that this is my home, not some shareable commodity. You can't just divvy it up or loan it like it's a used car. Mara flushed and bounced the baby slightly in a soothing motion as he started to fuss from the raised voices. We're trying to be reasonable. This is for Jake. He deserves a proper home to grow up in. She looked at me with a hardened stare. You're his aunt. Don't you want the best for him? A hot tear slid down my cheek. Of course I do, I whispered. But why does giving him the best mean I have to lose everything? I have offered other help, money, a temporary stay together. Why is that not enough? Daniel finally interjected, his voice strained. Because it just won't work, Em. Living together here would be too hard for everyone. Mara's right. 2 families under one roof. It's a recipe for disaster. And we can't take your money because we'd never be able to pay it back. This, transferring the house, is cleaner. We take over the mortgage or whatever, you take a step back for now. I realized he was talking about a permanent solution, essentially buying my house, except they couldn't really buy it at market value. They expected me to give it to them, or at best accept some token payment or promise of future payback that might never come. My nails dug into my palms. This is unbelievable, I said hoarsely. I can't just transfer the mortgage like that. Do you even know how anything works? Even if I agreed, the bank wouldn't let me simply hand it off without proof you can pay, which you can't. This isn't just moving furniture. It's my credit, my asset, my life's investment you're talking about. My father stepped forward, raising a placating hand. We'd figure out the logistics. I could co-sign with Daniel to assume the loan. The point is, we'd make it work legally. What matters is that you agree it's the right thing to do. I felt like I was in a nightmare. They had planned this out, down to details, without me. My own father was offering to co-sign and essentially shift my house into Daniel's possession. They truly expected me to stand aside and let it happen. The realization hit me like a punch. They considered this house more important to the family with a baby than the person, me, who currently lived in it. My legs felt weak. I leaned against the arm of the sofa for support. Do I have any say in this at all? I asked in a shaky voice. Or have you all decided for me? Of course you have a say, Daniel said, sounding pained. We're hoping you'll do this willingly, that you'll bless us with your generosity. We don't want to fight. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped my throat. You don't want to fight? What do you call this then? You've ambushed me in my home, all of you, to strong-arm me into submission. Do you even realize how betrayed I feel right now? Tears were flowing freely down my face now, and I didn't wipe them. I wanted them to see, to understand the pain they were causing. My mother sobbed softly into her tissue, but she remained by my father's side, nodding at his every word. They were united in this effort. Dad's voice hardened, losing patience. Sometimes doing the right thing hurts, Emily. We wouldn't be here if this wasn't so important. We raised you better than this selfishness we're seeing. Selfish. That word thundered in my ears. I had given and given my whole life to this family, and now when I dared hold on to one precious thing of my own, I was selfish. A flood of pent-up anger surged through me. I stood up straight, no longer feeling weak, but rather steady with resolve. I looked each of them in the eye, one by one. You want to know what selfish is? I said, voice low and trembling with fury. Selfish is expecting your daughter to live like a nomad so your son can have an easier life. Selfish is painting me as a villain to relatives because I wouldn't cave to your demands. Selfish is standing here in my living room telling me I'm not a good sister or daughter because I won't hand over the house I love. You talk about family and sacrifice. Well, I've sacrificed plenty. I've sacrificed enough. I won't do it anymore. Daniel's face contorted in anger. So that's it? You're really going to refuse outright? After everything we've said? After seeing how much we need this? His sudden shift in tone shocked me. Yes, I am refusing, I replied, voice cold. This conversation is over. I have tried to be kind, to find a middle ground, but none of you want that. You want my home on a silver platter. And my answer is no. Asterisk asterisk, Mara scowled, her arms tightening around baby Jake. The baby started to whine, upset by the tension and raised voices. You're unbelievable, she hissed. Your own nephew, and you don't even care if he lives in a cramped hovel. As long as you have your precious house, who cares about anyone else, right? My heart cracked at that accusation. How dare you say I don't care about him, I breathed. I love that child. But I will not destroy my life under the pretense of helping him. I can help in other ways, but you refuse to accept them. My mother, tears still on her cheeks, stepped forward as if to hug me. Emily, please, we don't want this to break the family. We can find a way. You can stay here a bit even after they move, until you find a place. We'll come visit you wherever you go. It's not like you're being banished. Banished. The word hung in the air. That's exactly what it felt like. Banishment from my own family unit, to make room for someone deemed more important. I backed away from her embrace. I felt a mix of sorrow and disgust seeing my mother plead for something so terribly unfair. I think you all should leave now, I said quietly, wiping my face with the back of my hand. There's nothing more to discuss. My father's jaw tightened. If you do this, Emily, if you turn your back on your brother and your nephew, I don't know how we can ever be the same again. His voice shook with emotion, anger and hurt. I met his gaze, my own eyes red and puffy. You're the ones turning your backs on me, I replied. I'm here, protecting what's mine, because none of you will. Not even you, Dad. My voice broke saying that, thinking how a father is usually a daughter's protector, yet here he was, effectively trying to take from me my shelter and security. There was a charged, painful silence. Daniel looked down at his feet, fists clenched. Mara rocked the baby, who was now fully crying. My mother sobbed into my father's shoulder. And my father, he just looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and anger that cut me to the bone. Without another word, one by one they turned and made their way to the door. Daniel was the last to move. He lingered, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, a blend of sorrow, rage, and perhaps regret. I hoped, foolishly, that he might rush back and hug me, or say he was sorry and didn't mean for it to go this far. But he didn't. He just shook his head slowly, and in a voice thick with resentment, said, "You're making a big mistake, Em." I felt a tear slide down my face. "No, you are," I whispered, voice trembling. He turned away and walked out, closing the door behind him with a dreadful finality. The click of that door latch was like the sound of my family bond snapping in two. They were gone, and I was alone, truly alone, in the home that had suddenly become far too quiet. I sank to the floor right there in the foyer, overcome by a storm of emotions. Through the window, I watched my family pile into their cars, not looking back. I pressed a hand to my mouth to stifle the sobs, but there was no one to hear me anyway. My chest ached as if it might implode from sorrow. In the span of an hour, my whole world had shifted. I had stood my ground, kept my beloved house, but possibly lost my family in doing so. As their cars disappeared down the street, I realized that nothing would ever be the same. The first part of this tragic saga had ended with a heavy silence and me on the floor, tears hitting the hardwood beneath me. I was left clinging to the only thing I had left, the four walls around me, while the people I loved walked away. That night, for the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to feel abandoned. The house was dark and still. Every creak of the floorboards echoed painfully, emphasizing that I was by myself. I stared at the family portrait on the wall, taken 2 years ago at a holiday gathering. We looked so happy, arms around each other. A sob racked my body. How could it come to this? How could my own brother, my parents, the people who meant everything to me, cast me aside because I refused to give them what they wanted? Questions swirled in my mind, but no answers came. I eventually cried myself into an exhausted sleep on the couch, the house completely quiet around me. In the weeks following that devastating confrontation, a cold war settled between me and my family. There were no calls, no visits. The silence was as heavy as a lead blanket. I would wake up and reach for my phone, only to find no new messages from them. Each day without contact felt like another thread fraying in the delicate tapestry that once was our family bond. At first, I hoped they just needed time to cool off. I told myself they'll come around. They love me and I love them. This will pass. But as days turned into weeks, hope began to dwindle. I considered calling them countless times, my finger hovering over my brother's name on my phone. I typed out long, emotional texts to my mother only to delete them. Pride and hurt held me back as much as longing did. Why should I be the one to apologize when I hadn't done anything wrong? And yet, I missed them so much it hurt. During this time, I found a small comfort in a close friend, Lena, who knew a bit of what was going on. One evening, she came over with a bottle of wine and a bag of groceries, insisting on keeping me company. We cooked pasta together, or rather she cooked while I moved listlessly around the kitchen. Over dinner, I finally poured out the whole story, every painful detail, to her. As I spoke, I realized how surreal it all sounded. My brother asking for my house, the family pressure, the explosive fight. Lena listened, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief, her eyes sympathetic. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Emily, this is beyond unfair. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Tears threatened to well up again, but I held them back, having cried enough for a lifetime. Do you think I did the right thing? I asked in a small voice. Deep down, I was so unsure, isolated in my own perspective. My family's united front against me had made me question myself at every turn. Absolutely, Lena said without hesitation. What they asked of you is outrageous. No one has the right to demand your home, even if they are family. You offered to help in other ways and they refused. That's on them, not you. I nodded, trying to let her words reassure me. Still, the guilt and sadness lingered. I can't believe they chose a house over me, I murmured, staring at the swirling red wine in my glass. Lena sighed. They probably don't see it that way. They've convinced themselves that you're the one choosing a house over them. It's twisted, I know. She was right. In my parents' and brother's eyes, I was the one being stubborn, valuing material things over family. That's likely the story they were telling themselves to justify their actions. The realization made me feel a mix of anger and sorrow all over again. A month crawled by in this agonizing limbo. Life went on in mechanical motions. I went to work, I ate meals alone. I watched TV in the evenings with numb attention. Sometimes I'd find a toy of Jake's that had been left behind during a visit, or see a family photo in a drawer, and the wound would reopen fresh. Then one day, a letter arrived in my mailbox that jolted me from my standstill. It was from a lawyer's office. With trembling hands, I tore it open and read the contents. As my eyes scanned the words, my vision blurred. It was a formal notice stating that Daniel and his partner were preparing to pursue legal action to obtain housing based on familial obligation, claiming I had agreed to let them move in and then reneged, causing them hardship. They were essentially threatening to take me to court over the house, painting me as someone who had made a promise and broke it. Furthermore, the letter mentioned that my parents supported their claim and that there might even be a question of an understanding that the house would remain in the family. I had to sit down as my legs nearly gave out. Legal action? Was this even real? There is no law that can force me to give up my house to my brother. Any lawyer would know that. The claim was flimsy and absurd. Perhaps it was a bluff, a final intimidation tactic. Regardless, seeing it in writing made my hands shake with rage. Any remaining illusion that Daniel was an unwilling participant, dragged along by others, shattered in that moment. He had to have agreed to this, possibly even initiated it. This was the final betrayal taking shape, in black ink on white paper. Tears of anger and hurt burned in my eyes as I reread the letter. My own brother was prepared to drag me through the mud in front of a court and a judge, to publicly air our dirty laundry and lie about me if needed, just to get his way. And my parents were backing him up in writing. The whole family truly had turned against me now, guns blazing. I called the lawyer's office number provided, my voice trembling, but determined to get answers. A curt secretary informed me that the letter was a preliminary notice and that mediation was preferred before any court filings. She said that the family hoped I would agree to a mediated discussion with an impartial party. I hung up without confirming anything, heart pounding. Mediation? They wanted to force me into a room with a stranger to pressure me yet again under the guise of legality and impartiality? It felt like they were trying every avenue to break my resolve. I didn't know whether to scream or sob. In the end, I did both. Alone in my living room, the echoes of my anguish bouncing off the walls that I now feared I might actually lose. When I finally calmed down, I knew I needed help. I wasn't going to navigate this nightmare alone. If they had a lawyer, I needed one too. Through a referral from a colleague, I found a reputable family law attorney. Sitting in her office a week later, I recounted the entire saga. It felt strange and embarrassing to explain to a stranger how my family was effectively trying to oust me from my own home. But she listened without judgment, nodding in all the right places. After I finished, she leaned forward and said gently, legally, they don't have a leg to stand on regarding ownership. If the house is titled in your name and you've paid for it, they cannot force you to give it up or let them live there. The only exception might be some claim of a lease or housing arrangement if you had a formal agreement, but from what you say, there was nothing in writing. This letter is likely a pressure tactic. Ethically questionable, but not illegal to attempt. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So they can't take my house? I asked, still needing the reassurance in plain terms. No, she said firmly. Absolutely not. At best, they might drag you into a mediation or even file a frivolous suit, but it would get thrown out of court. However, you should respond through a lawyer to shut this down quickly. We can send a letter refuting their claims and making it clear that any further harassment will result in you seeking legal protection, possibly a restraining order if it comes to that. A restraining order against my own family. The thought made me sick to my stomach. I don't want it to escalate that far. I just want them to stop, I murmured. The lawyer gave me a sympathetic smile. I understand. We'll start with a firm response. Often, that's enough to make people reconsider when they know you're legally fortified. True to her word, she drafted a response letter. It stated, in polite but unmistakable language, that I had no legal or moral obligation to give up my house, that any suggestion I had agreed to do so was false, and that if they continued with threats or slander, I was prepared to defend my rights vigorously. I read the final draft before it was sent out. It was perfect and utterly heartbreaking. How on earth did it come to this, that I needed to threaten legal action against my parents and brother? I authorized the lawyer to send it, tears in my eyes as I signed my name. A week passed with no reply. During that time, I found out through social media that Daniel and Mara had moved in with my parents. Their lease must have ended, and since they hadn't gotten my house, they took the next available option. My parents' home is not very big, 2 bedrooms, so I can't imagine it was comfortable with 4 adults and a baby under one roof. But ironically, that was the very situation they claimed would be too hard if they moved in with me. The difference, of course, was pride and ownership. At my parents, they could feel like victims of my stubbornness, rather than equals sharing my space. One evening, I received a call from my father. I stared at his name flashing on my phone, conflict raging inside me. Part of me ached to hear his voice, but another part, the wounded part, remembered the ugly things said and the legal letter and bristled. I answered, voice tentative, hello. He cleared his throat. Emily, it's Dad. His tone was formal, unfamiliar. I waited, heart thumping. We got the letter from your attorney, he finally said. Understood. We won't pursue that matter further. I closed my eyes, a swell of relief mixing with sorrow. Thank you, I whispered. I expected him to hang up or offer some curt farewell, but instead I heard him sigh heavily on the line. What came next felt like the closest thing to an apology I'd gotten. This whole thing, it's unfortunate it came to this. We never wanted to hurt you. A lump formed in my throat. I restrained the urge to say, but you did hurt me. Instead, I replied softly, I never wanted any of this either, Dad. My voice broke despite my efforts to steady it. He paused, and in a weary voice said, your mother misses you. She's heartbroken. This has broken her, Emily. He was placing the weight of my mother's feelings on my shoulders, and it took all my strength not to snap back. I miss her too. I miss all of you, I said, truthfully. But I felt like none of you missed me, only what I could give. There was a silence. Then a muffled sound. I realized my mother was on the line too, likely listening in or on speaker. She spoke, her voice quavering. We thought we were doing what's best for the family, dear. We didn't mean to push you so far away. Can't we come back from this? Please? I felt tears spill over. How many nights had I dreamed of hearing those words? And yet, hearing them now, I wasn't sure what to feel. I wanted to run back into my parents' arms, but I also didn't trust that they wouldn't turn on me again the moment I didn't comply with something they wanted. They had shown me how conditional their support could be. I don't know, I answered honestly, my voice trembling. I'm so hurt. I'm trying to heal, but I don't know how to just pretend nothing happened. We can take it slow, my father interjected. Maybe have dinner together, just talk. Not about the house, I promise. About other things. We won't mention it again. It was an olive branch, bruised and late, but still, a branch. My wounded heart yearned for family, for reconciliation. Against my caution, I found myself agreeing. Okay, dinner would be nice. We arranged to meet at a restaurant in a couple of days. After I hung up, I felt anxious and conflicted. Had the legal standoff scared them straight? Or was this a ploy to get me to lower my guard? I hated that I even had those thoughts about my own family, but they were inevitable after what had happened. When the evening of the dinner came, I arrived early, fidgeting with my napkin at the table as I waited. My stomach was in knots. Soon, my parents walked in, followed by Daniel and Mara carrying the baby. I tensed at the sight of all of them together. This was not just dinner with my parents as I'd assumed. It was the whole family. It felt like an ambush all over again, despite their smiles and gentle demeanor. We exchanged cautious hellos and sat down. The first few minutes were unbearably polite and awkward. We talked about mundane things, the weather, my job, the latest cute things baby Jake was doing. The baby grinned at me from his high chair, and I couldn't help but smile back, heart aching at how much I loved that little boy. For a moment, it felt almost normal, like we were just any family out for a meal. But the facade didn't last long. At some point after the appetizers, Daniel cleared his throat. He looked directly at me. I owe you an apology, he said, voice low. My breath caught. This was what I had wanted to hear for months. I'm sorry for the way things went down. I was wrong to push you like that. Mara's face snapped towards him in surprise. It seemed this was not a pre-agreed script. My mother looked between us nervously, and my father kept his eyes on his plate, as if bracing himself. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. Thank you, I managed to reply. That means a lot to hear. Daniel continued, words tumbling out in a remorseful rush. Living all together at Mom and Dad's this past month has been eye-opening. It's been hard on everyone. We fight about small things because we're all cramped. And I realized if we had forced our way into your house, it would have been the same, or worse. We probably would have destroyed our relationship completely trying to live together or taking over your space. I was blinded by stress and what I thought was necessity. But I never wanted to hurt you, Em. His voice cracked. You're my sister. I miss you. I'm so sorry. Tears welled up in my eyes. This was all I ever wanted. My brother back, the one who cared about me. I miss you too, I whispered, a tear slipping down my cheek. He stood and walked around the table to my side. In front of the whole restaurant, he gently pulled me up and wrapped me in a tight hug. I heard him sniffling near my ear, and I was outright crying into his shoulder. I'm sorry, he kept repeating softly. I'm sorry. I clung to him, patting his back, forgiving him even though the pain was still there. Over his shoulder, I saw Mara's face. She looked upset, perhaps feeling blamed by his apology, or simply uncomfortable with this turn of events. My parents were both crying quietly, watching their children embrace. When we broke apart, Mara spoke, her tone defensive. We all made mistakes, she said. I'm sorry too, Emily, if we came on too strong. The words were there, but her voice was flat and not entirely convincing. Still, I appreciated the gesture. I nodded to her in acknowledgement. We sat back down and, for the first time in a long time, talked honestly. It was not all sunshine, there were still raw wounds. I told them how cornered and betrayed I felt, how frightening it was to consider losing my home and my family all at once. My parents admitted they had panicked about the baby's situation and acted out of desperation, not realizing how terribly they were treating me. My mother, tears in her eyes, squeezed my hand and said, I was wrong, dear. We were wrong. We just wanted to help Daniel, but we lost sight of how cruel we were being to you. Can you ever forgive us? I cried and told her I would, but trust would take time to rebuild. She nodded, understanding. My father apologized for the harsh words and for going along with the legal intimidation, which he said was mostly at Mara's urging. Mara looked away, not meeting my gaze at that mention. He seemed deeply ashamed, and I realized seeing the family fractured had hurt him more than he admitted. It was an emotional reunion of sorts, but not without its underlying fractures. The one person who remained somewhat distant was Mara. I could sense she resented having to abandon the plan of getting my house. Perhaps she even blamed me for the difficult month they'd had living at my parents'. But at least on the surface, she behaved courteously. In the end, we agreed on some new boundaries. The topic of my house was now completely off limits. Daniel and Mara would not move in. They had started searching for an affordable rental in a nearby town, and I even offered to help with a small amount of money for their deposit, which they accepted this time, somewhat humbled by circumstances. We all just wanted peace. That night, after many hugs and even tentative smiles, we parted ways outside the restaurant. My parents each hugged me tightly as if letting go of a long-lost child. Mara gave a polite hug and a quick goodnight. Daniel was last. He held my hands and said, "Thank you for giving us a chance to make things right. I know it won't be easy to forget what happened, but I'll do everything I can to earn your trust back." I believed him, or at least wanted to. As I drove home alone, I felt a cautious hope. The rift wasn't fully healed. Hairline cracks remained in the foundation of our relationships, But maybe, with time, love and understanding could fill them in. However, life is rarely that simple or neat. In the weeks that followed, though my parents and Daniel truly seemed sincere in repairing things, frequent calls, visits with the baby, my dad coming over to help fix a leak in my roof as a gesture of support, etc., Mara's attitude remained cool. She was civil but distant whenever I saw her. I tried to empathize. Perhaps she felt guilty or embarrassed. I decided to give her space, assuming time would soften the awkwardness. It didn't. In fact, it soon became clear that Mara harbored a deep grudge. The clues were subtle at first. For instance, when I'd drop by my parents' house and Mara was there, she'd take Jake into another room shortly after I arrived, as if not wanting me around him. She wasn't outright rude, but there was a chill. The final act of betrayal, the true breaking point, came about 2 months after that tearful dinner. By then, I thought the worst was behind us. How wrong I was. One Saturday morning, I was surprised by a visit from a social worker at my door. I was utterly confused. I hadn't requested any services or anything. The young woman introduced herself politely and said that a report had been made expressing concern that I might be a danger to myself or others and possibly dealing with an unstable mental state in a house with unsafe conditions. I was flabbergasted. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I live alone, I'm fine, and my house is certainly not unsafe," I explained. The social worker seemed apologetic. The report was anonymous, but mentioned recent family conflicts and erratic behavior. By protocol, we have to follow up on such reports, especially when they mention potential self-harm or unstable living conditions. A cold wave of realization swept over me. This sounded like Mara's handiwork, or someone trying one last twisted angle to force me out. Perhaps the idea was to paint me as mentally unfit to live alone or manage my affairs. It was a long shot, and a vile one at that. I let the social worker in to show everything was normal. She spoke with me for a while, quickly determining I was completely fine. There was no evidence of any instability or unsafe environment. In fact, my home was tidy and cozy. I even showed her proof of employment and community ties to assure her I wasn't in any crisis. She left after apologizing for the disturbance and said it looked like probably a false alarm or misunderstanding. When I closed the door behind her, I shook with anger. Anonymous or not, I knew this had Mara's fingerprints all over it. No one else would have thought to call a social agency with lies. None of my friends would do such a thing, and my parents and Daniel were working to mend things. They wouldn't escalate like this now. Mara was furious that I'd gotten my way, and this felt like her secret revenge, a cowardly, underhanded attempt to smear me or cause me trouble. That evening, I invited my brother to my house alone. I told him I needed to discuss something important without distractions. He came, a bit nervous, probably sensing the serious tone in my voice. We sat in the living room, and I recounted the social worker's visit, watching his face carefully as I spoke. As I expected, he was aghast. "Who would do that?" he exclaimed, looking genuinely shocked and angry on my behalf. I gave him a long, measured look. "You tell me, Daniel. Who had motive to paint me as unstable? To perhaps try and get authorities to think I shouldn't be living on my own or deserve to have my house?" His eyes widened, and I saw the realization hit. "No, you don't think. Mara? Who else?" I replied, bitterness creeping into my voice. She was the only one still clearly unhappy with me. And she's smart enough to be that devious. She knew a legal route wouldn't work, so maybe this was her way to retaliate or scare me. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, standing up to pace. "I can't believe she would go that far. I know she was upset, but calling a social worker on you? That's insane." I sat quietly, tears pricking my eyes. Is it really so hard to believe? Think about it. And to file an anonymous false report. It's cruel. She tried to make me seem crazy or dangerous. Daniel, how can I just act like that's okay? He stopped pacing and looked at me with agony in his expression. Um, I. I'm so sorry. If it was her, I swear I didn't know anything about it. We promised to put this behind us. I thought she had too. I'll talk to her. I'll find out the truth. I nodded. Please do. Because if it was her, I don't know how I can ever have a relationship with her again. Or with you, if you stand by her and condone that. My voice was heavy with the implication. As much as I loved my brother, I was steeling myself for the possibility that I might have to distance myself for good if his wife was determined to harm me. When Daniel left, he gave me a quick, desperate hug, as if seeking reassurance that we'd be okay. I hugged him back but said nothing. The next day, he called and confirmed what I already knew in my heart. Mara had made the call. She confessed to him after he pressed, saying she only did it out of worry, a lie. Her worry was that I was depressed and alone, and she claimed she thought I might hurt myself, which was absolutely untrue, and she never expressed that concern to anyone before. She tried to justify that she was attempting to get me help, but it was clearly an excuse to cover a malicious act. She admitted it was also to, make you reconsider living alone, Daniel said quietly over the phone. He sounded sick with guilt and frustration. I don't know what to say, Em. She crossed a line. A big one. I told her that, and we've been arguing nonstop since. I closed my eyes as a tear rolled down. So it had come to this. My brother's wife actively working against me in the cruelest of ways. What are you going to do? I asked him softly. He was silent for a moment. I honestly don't know. I'm trying to make her understand how wrong that was. I told her she needs to apologize to you. She said she will, but I had to practically force that promise out of her. I'm not even sure she means it. I let out a sad, mirthless laugh. An apology from her means nothing to me right now. Only thing I'd accept is her leaving me the hell alone for the rest of my life. My voice hardened, years of hurt crystallizing. I can't believe this, Daniel muttered, mostly to himself. Everything was getting better, and then she. Why can't she let it go? I know she really wanted the house, but this is too much. He sounded angry, but also defeated. I realized then that no matter how much my brother loved me and wanted to fix things, he was bound tightly to Mara and her will. She and the baby were his primary family now. If forced to truly choose a side, he might very well choose them over me again and again, even if he knew it was wrong. That thought was like swallowing broken glass, but it was the reality I had to face. Daniel, I said quietly, I love you. But I can't continue like this. Not if she's in the picture and still aiming to hurt me. I won't make you choose. I know you can't just abandon your family. But I also won't stay around to be a target. My voice trembled, but I pressed on until Mara genuinely changes or at least respects my boundaries. I have to remove myself from this. He started to cry on the phone. Please, don't do this. I'll fix it. I'll make her see reason. She'll apologize. We'll all sit down. We can sort this. I cut him off, gentle but firm. Some things can't be sorted right now. Your wife tried to undermine my sanity and ruin my peace. That isn't something a simple sorry can mend. I need time away. And I think you all should leave me be for a while. He was openly sobbing now, and it tore at my heart. I'm sorry, he kept saying through tears. I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this to happen. My own tears flowed. I know, I whispered. Me neither. But it happened. I won't blame you for what she did, but I can't pretend everything's okay either. We ended the call with a painful goodbye. I knew our relationship had once again been shaken, maybe even irrevocably this time, despite his apologies. Because now there was a wedge that likely could never be removed, his wife's hatred for me and my resulting distrust of her and, by extension, of how safe I could feel around my brother if she was influencing him. In the aftermath, my parents tried to intervene and mediate, but I told them firmly that I needed space and that I wasn't going to discuss Mara's actions beyond stating the facts. To my surprise, my father, who had by now seen enough of the truth, told me he understood and that he would respect my wishes. My mother was more upset, fretting about the family falling apart again. But what could any of us do? Mara was the mother of their grandchild. She wasn't going anywhere, and they couldn't exactly take my side against their son's wife for long without losing their son and grandbaby. So we fell into an uneasy arrangement. I stepped back. I stopped attending family gatherings if Mara would be there. I kept in touch with my parents by phone and saw them occasionally one-on-one, but any meeting that included my brother's family was off the table. Daniel, to his credit, did come by himself a few times to check on me, sometimes with the baby if Mara would allow it. Those visits were bittersweet. I cherished seeing my nephew's sweet face and spending time with my brother, but there was a sadness knowing this might be all we have. The rest of the family, well, they had effectively turned away in full now. Not with the same anger as before, but with a resigned sorrow. We all knew Mara had crossed a line, but for Daniel's sake, they tolerated her, and thus tolerated her silent feud with me. I became the relative who was spoken of in careful terms, the daughter who needed space, and the sister who was hurt by all that happened. It felt like the final pages of the saga were not a triumphant reconciliation, but rather a somber acceptance of a fractured family. My brother had betrayed me, first under pressure, then again by not preventing the collateral damage that followed. My parents had betrayed me by siding against me, then tried to undo it, only to be rendered helpless in the face of their daughter-in-law's malice. And I, in protecting myself and my home, had perhaps betrayed them in their eyes, too, by stepping away. It's a strange thing, to love your family and yet feel you cannot have them in your life fully. The heart doesn't know how to make sense of that. Even now, as I speak these words in this confessional tone, I am both heartbroken and oddly at peace. Heartbroken for obvious reasons. I lost the family I thought I had. But at peace because I stood up for myself when it mattered most. I didn't yield to unjust demands, and I survived the storm they unleashed. I still have my home, the one place where I feel safe, and I will not let anyone take it from me, not even those I love. Sometimes, late at night, I walk through each room of my house, and I recall the memories shared here. Daniel helping me repaint the kitchen when I first moved in, Mom baking pies with me for Thanksgiving in the oven, Dad building the shelves in my study, Mara laughing over a glass of wine with me on the porch back when we were friendly, and baby Jake's soft coos during the few times I got to babysit him here. These memories cling to the walls like ghosts of a happier time. It hurts to remember, but it would hurt more to forget. I don't know what the future holds for me and my family. Maybe with more time, Mara's resentment will fade and she will truly apologize and mean it. Maybe my brother will find the courage to draw a line with her for the sake of peace. Or maybe nothing will change, and this rift will remain, quietly widening as years go by. I've learned that I cannot predict or control what others will do, even those closest to me. What I do know is that I have to keep living my life. I have to find happiness where I can. I have my work, my friends like Lena who have been my rock, and I have this home filled with both joyous and painful memories. I will likely always carry the scars of this betrayal. How could I not? Family wounds cut the deepest because they come from people woven into your soul. In my darkest moments, I felt utterly abandoned and unloved. But I've come to realize that loving someone doesn't always mean agreeing with them or giving them what they want. My family may have turned away from me when I refused their demand, but I like to think that, in their own flawed way, they did believe they were doing the right thing at the time. Misguided love can still hurt as much as hate. As for me, I have no hatred in my heart for them, not even for Mara, if you can believe it. What I feel is more complicated, a mix of sorrow, longing, and guarded hope. Sorrow for what's been broken, longing for what used to be, and hope that one day we might find a way back to some form of unity, though it may never look the same as before. Until then, I continue on, one day at a time, behind the closed doors of this house that is truly mine. The very house that was once the battleground of our family's worst conflict has now become my shelter in the aftermath. Within these walls I've wept, raged, and also begun to heal. Within these walls, I've learned to stand up for myself, even at a tremendous cost. My story is not a fairy tale with a clear happy ending. It's a real one, messy, painful, and still unfolding. But it's my story, and telling it is part of how I heal. Maybe someone out there will hear this and think twice before letting greed or desperation drive them to betray a loved one. Maybe someone will find strength in knowing they're not alone in feeling betrayed by those who should love them the most. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding myself. I cherish the small circle of support I have in friends and the tentative mending with my parents and brother from a safe distance. I pour love into my nephew when I get the rare chance, hoping he'll never fully understand this dark chapter of our lives. And I sit in my garden some evenings, listening to the quiet and remind myself that I did what I had to do to preserve my dignity and sanity. Blood is thicker than water, they say. I used to believe that wholeheartedly, that family bonds would withstand any storm. I've learned that blood can also boil and spill, causing damage that's hard to repair. In the end, I still have love for my family, but I've learned to love myself enough to never again let them, or anyone, take from me the things that keep me whole. This has been the hardest thing I've ever gone through. It has changed me forever. I still dream of a day when forgiveness washes away the remaining pain and when trust can be rebuilt brick by brick, like a house renovated after a disaster. Whether or not that day ever comes, I know I'll be okay. I have myself, and I have my home, both stronger now for having weathered the tempest. And so, behind closed doors, my life continues. Not the life I once pictured with a family always by my side, but a life I am making worth living nonetheless. It's quieter, lonelier at times, but also more honest. The door is always open should my family truly return with understanding and respect. Until then, I keep that door closed to harm and open to hope. That is my story, one of love, betrayal, and the uneasy peace that follows. Thank you for listening to my confession. We tell the stories most people keep buried. If you're still here, you were meant to hear this. Subscribe to Behind Closed Doors.